All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back here to Kicking It with Knuble, episode 19. Mike, we are back. Another guest here this week. Jim Jackson, longtime broadcaster for the Philadelphia Flyers, a legend in the Flyers, community and things like that. JJ, thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Legend in my own mind, maybe, Chris. I don't know about anybody else, but appreciate it. Glad to be here. Great to see you, Mike. It's been a good year or so since I've seen you. I
Yeah,
think
probably since the
last
recce thing
summer.
last year, and so,
Yeah,
yeah, we really
yeah.
appreciate you coming on and chatting. So watching the games, I hear your voice, I feel like we're close. But, yeah, we haven't talked in a year.
I get that a lot, believe it or not.
Yeah, I know, right?
But
Yeah, yeah.
no, Mike, Chris is one of my favorite Flyer players to call. He was always there, win or lose, after games. Always would talk and would have a forthright answer. Didn't act like you were taking up his time. And so I owe you a lot of these, actually, Mike, but because I was bugging you with questions a lot when you played. But and also, as I've told him many times, and I've said on the air, in fact, even this year, one of the Flyers who really scored more goals than he was ever given credit for, because before they looked into every goal with super slow, there was Mike scoring a lot of goals that hit off of him or he deflected, maybe just subtly, but we would catch it eventually on our replays, but it would never change because in those days, the team pretty much had to go and get it changed, and Mike just never did that. So a class act that he was, but as we were discussing before we went on, you might have cost yourself some money there, Mike, with the
Well,
contracts. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe 50, maybe 100, an extra $1,000 or $100 here and there. But it was, there were times it'd skip off your leg and very subtle. You almost have a puck mark on your sock. You could have a puck mark on the back of your
That's right.
sock, and then, yeah, no, it's no complaints. That's the way it goes. And like we were talking before, it makes a big deal. Extra goal or two makes a big deal on guys getting signed and re-signed. And you even brought up an interesting point about analytics. What the analytics say. So it shows your production going up and stuff like that. So it's not just making maybe a guy goes from 9 goals to 10 goals or 19 goals to 20 goals. It certainly changes. It can change things, and there's a lot of value in it now. So it's probably a necessary thing that it's reviewed so hard now, and I think it's proper. And no more phantom points anywhere. Guys get what they're due, and that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's how it should be these days with technology too.
There's not even phantom shots anymore because of
Yeah.
some people who might have something on the line.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that
Not
too.
players,
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
I
Right.
didn't
Yeah,
even talk about the
fans.
gambling part of it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
that's why I think the shot count we see him, it changes during the game. I mean, it drives me crazy. So I'll say Flyers out shooting the Islanders 10-7, and then I'll look up 2 seconds later and it's like 8-6 Islanders. It's like, well, the shots have changed because they have to get it right for gambling purposes because there's prop bets on shots.
Yeah,
So a lot of it has to do with that and the analytics, and they want to get all the numbers right, of course. But
Right.
yeah, they're changing them all the time. You have to keep a constant eye on all the stats. Like we have the running time real stats with us as we're calling the game, but they change so much. I'm almost afraid to use them some of the time. So I always say unofficially now, but it does
right.
change a lot.
It's funny. It leads me to another point. I was watching. I know we haven't started the talk about it. Now we're talking about stuff, but I was watching a game last night. And they have the roving like odds first. Like anytime goal scorer. Going
Yes.
on the bottom of the screen, and it's it happened to be the Red Wings game. I think their partnership's FanDuel or whatever. But
Yeah.
the rolling thing there, and I always thought it kind of occurred to me as a player, like, well, if I watch this game back, I can kind of see what everybody thinks of my goal scoring ability, depending on your
Yeah.
odds, like how dangerous
For
are you as a
sure.
player? I said, that's kind of an interesting. I wonder if players really look at some of that gambling stuff in their odds, and can that mess with you a little bit? Like, if I'm a plus whatever, a plus 1,000 to score tonight, well, I guess I must not be scoring a lot, or I'm not very
Right.
dangerous, so
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
I got to
Take
be
it
more
personally.
dangerous. I got to improve my odds somehow.
Yeah. Take it personally.
Yeah, I thought it was very.
It's
I
definitely
mean,
a good point too.
it's scary though, because I think back maybe just as recently as 10 years ago, if I even mentioned a hockey pool,
Right,
I'd get called in. We couldn't talk about anything close to gambling on the air.
right.
And
Right.
now every other ad, I'm talking about,
Yeah,
DraftKings or
Yeah.
FanDuel or,
yeah,
something. So it is amazing.
yeah.
Uh,
Crazy how far it's come. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. And obviously, last night, Mike, as you were talking about watching that, pretty big deal with Flyers. Obviously, they're playing mid game, and there's a trade mid game, so it's Farabee Frost. They both go to Calgary. Flyers get back Andre Kuzmenko, Jacob Pelche, 2025 second round pick, 2028 seventh. JJ, for you, like when you look at this, is this, obviously it seems like it's a little bit of a salary cap move, something that could open up some space, a little bit, towards the off season and things like that. Kuzmenko's a UFA, Pelche is a little bit younger. They get a winger. Flyers do trade a center, so that they do have one less center for the rest, like 35 ish something games. Might be a little bit less off the top of my head, but just any thoughts overall on the big trade last night?
Yeah, it's a got a lot of layers, this trade.
Yeah,
I guess generally I'll say I think Danny Briere is playing chess and not checkers. I think he's watching where he's leaving himself here. I think that is probably as important as the players he got back, because they do clear quite a bit of space with Joel's contract moving forward, assuming they aren't re-signing Kuzmenko. But we just don't know where it's going to go, because Mako could come in here and bond with Michkov, who he's played briefly with earlier in his career. Actually, I believe assisted on Michkov's first or second professional goal over in the KHL. So there may be something that develops there. We don't know. Kuzmenko, twice in his career already, has gone to a new team and lit it up for like 2 or 3 months. If he does that here, do the Flyers entertain signing him? I don't know, but they may keep him through the trade deadline. They may trade him before the trade deadline, and they may get something of value back if he's going really well. So that can go in a lot of different directions, but the space being cleared from Joel's contract, I think, is important. I will say this. About a year ago right now, I remember going to Joel in the locker room and saying, "You're playing the best hockey I've seen you play." And he was. Last year, first half, especially the month and a half leading up to about the midpoint of the season, that was Joel Farabee. It looked like he had recovered completely from his surgery, and he was playing with speed. He was playing with a little grit. He was getting some goals. He was putting some points up, doing a lot of different things for the team. And it almost seemed like from the time I said that to him, maybe I jinxed him, I don't know, but his play just dropped off after that, and he didn't get it back this year. The risk the Flyers run is this guy's only 24 years old, and if he gets back to where he was there, or where he was when he scored 20 goals in a shortened season early in his career, he's going to be a really good player. And that's a
yeah,
player that they had as a young player and then let another team basically bask in the glory of all they went through with his development, which Justin Williams, Patrick Sharp, that has happened before, where it comes back to bite you a little bit. Morgan is a guy who I think we know what he is. He has shown us he's a very skilled forward. He has some streaky moments where he's really a major force offensively. There are also times where he isn't there. He's a slow starter, seems to be much better in the second half of the year. But he is what he is. He's a player that I think Calgary can use, and I think he can play and get minutes there and be a productive player. I don't know as if he's more than a 3, maybe a 2 on some teams. I don't think a number 1 center, but a decent player. But I think they know what they have in Morgan. I think with Joel, you do run the risk that he could take off a little bit in Calgary. So there's some risk there. But they have Peltier coming back, and a young player that I think Calgary's probably feeling the same way about, that I just talked about with Joel. He's had some bursts with them, and especially lately, where he's played really well and they really liked him. But you got to give up something to get something, so they give him up. But when you put the players together, just 2 for 2, I think Calgary might have gotten the better of it, but when you take into consideration the Flyers might get something more for Kuzmenko, that they clear the salary cap space, might be able to make some moves because of that, then that makes this trade more balanced. And again, playing playing chess versus checkers. If you're playing chess, you're looking long term. Where you leave yourself, I'm never good at that. If I'm more of a checkers player, where
Yeah.
I want the immediate, I want
Yeah.
the immediate result. If you're playing chess there, I think Danny knows what he's doing. And I don't think by any means he's done. Now, whether that means before the trade deadline or in the off season, I'm not
right,
sure, but I think there are some moves. They have to make some moves in the middle. As you
yeah,
mentioned, they traded a center. They were already light in the center. They do have Jet Lachenko coming, but they don't have a ton of prospects at center, and they're pretty light, and they have an injured center in Ryan Poehling right now. So
Right.
they're really, really thin there. So they have to make a move there somewhere. I don't know at what point they make that move, but I think they do have to add a center somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you kind of touched that. There's a little more beneath the surface, right? This trade, it might not, there's a little more lurking beneath the surface. And again, we talked, I don't know, a couple episodes ago, maybe about like it's constant. Like you never know when these trades are coming, but it's every day they're thinking about ways to make the team better. And I think, maybe Joel Farabee, maybe maybe a little change of scenery might help him out, and those are trades like as a player. 10 years from now, he's like, wow, that was really the start of something when I left Philadelphia. And and things really changed for me. And it may not even be in Calgary, it may be somewhere else down the lines, but maybe start, getting a little change of scenery might be good. He kind of was figuring out how he could be used a little bit this year. He's trying to fight a little bit. He was trying to do some different things. Torts was moving him around. Sometimes it's just easier to get on somewhere else and get a reset, for a player like him. And Danny gets the benefit of moving the money, and you get two players back. And again, like you said, like you analyzed, you might be able to turn that into something else. You're going to do something with it down the road. So it's, again, there's a little more layer, it's kind of a layered situation, and you got to kind of look through all the layers. And again, time tells, how that stuff works out.
Well, your career, Mike, you came to Philly. That obviously turned out to be a great move for your career.
Yeah. And even before that, I was stuck in Detroit and with a bunch of Hall of Famers. I need to become an everyday player, and I moved to New York and that was Gretzky's last year, played with him that last year and got to play every game. So that's where it starts, like where, you're going to a place where you're going to be playing every game. You're not wondering coming into the locker room, what's going to happen. As a young player, when you're 24, that the time on ice, minutes on ice, and those situations are all part of your development, as a player and becoming a better player. And 24 is still super young, but it's a nice feeling to know you're going to be in the lineup every day going to the rink, and hopefully that provides that. Calgary can provide that for Joel Farabee, and that would be the best situation for him, is getting that chance to play every day and play your 13 to 15 minutes, and even strive for a little bit more than that, some special teams or whatever. And that's what you can hope for that. And that's what you hope for as a player.
Maybe it helps. That works out that way for Peltier as well, coming to Philadelphia.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I feel like, it seems like one of the moves that, obviously it feels like something else is kind of brewing. I feel like, when you look at it, it's right now, I think Noah Cates is probably going to slot into the 1C for at least the rest of the season, depending on, I guess, how, Couturier goes, and also, obviously Poehling, JJ, like you mentioned too, depending on when he comes back and whatnot. So I guess we'll kind of see. I guess kind of going off that, JJ, like for you, like obviously Danny talked a little bit recently, kind of mentioned, some different things in terms of Ristolainen and Law and kind of what they could do at the deadline. But do you feel like where the team is going, and I guess, like off of this move, and I know it's been a little bit of a struggle recently, but January I think was a little bit of a better month for them, and outside of December, and then they make this move. So do you feel like like for you, do you like the direction and kind of where they're going towards the off season here, and also just the trade deadline coming up?
well, excuse me, all along, Danny and Jonesy have talked about staying competitive now and being great in the future. And being great means every single year as the season starts, being considered one of the teams that can win the Stanley Cup. Like right now, who's in that regard? Colorado, it seems. Tampa for quite a long stretch. Maybe they're at the end of their run now, but they pretty much every year they're in the Florida's now into that mix. Boston's been in that mix for a long time. The Flyers want to be that, and they were that back in Mike's day and before that for a long time, really through the 70s, 80s, 90s, into the aughts. The Flyers were considered almost every season to be at least a potentially a Stanley Cup contender, not just a playoff contender. So that's where they want to be. They're not there now. They are competitive. They almost made the playoffs last year. They were slotting to. I mean, this trade, if nothing else, follows within the season before the deadline in terms of adding to this roster. I mean, with this lineup of centers, it's going to be a major challenge to stay competitive in the playoff race, I think, because, I mean, Noah Cates, I'm one of his biggest fans. Is he a number one center? I don't know about that. He was a number one center 2 years ago, did the job defensively, but can he produce offensively at the same time? I love Noah Cates as a player, so I don't want this to come off as a criticism. I'm just saying you're now slotting people up a little bit higher in the lineup. And if Paling isn't coming back, it's Rodrigo Abels and maybe somebody else from the Phantoms
especially with
as a
you know
center.
with no Tippett either, which that's part of it too.
Yeah, we don't know on the Tippett, but I'm talking up and down the middle. It's just their
Yeah,
wings, they're still a pretty deep team. I mean, they added 2 wings to a pretty good lineup and stable of wingers. I'm more concerned about the middle. Scott Lawton, I assume, is going to have to play the middle now, and we'll see where it goes. They have a couple of guys they might want to get a look at with the Phantoms. Gaucher has had a good season down there. We'll see how it goes, but I mean, competitive. They've been competitive. They're not an easy out most nights. So they've got that part. It's now about building. And so as you move forward, do you trade pieces like Ristolainen and Lawton at the deadline? That's really the big question. And Danny's always been forthright about this. He'll move him if the deal is right. If he's not getting an offer for something that he feels is really going to help this team move forward, he's not going to just trade him because they both have term left in their contracts. They're not unrestricted free agents. So there's no pressure to necessarily move them. They're both good in the locker room. Scott Lawton is awesome in the locker room. He's one of the glue guys. So he has to consider that too. So although Farabee was, to be honest, one of those glue guys too. And they did move him. So, I mean, it can happen. But Scott Lawton is really, along with Couturier, who is the captain, Lawton and Konechny, those three are probably your 3 key leaders on this team. Sanheim's inching into that realm as well. Any of those guys get moved, that's part of the core leadership group. So you have to take that into consideration too. So a lot of elements, Chris, but I would say that I trust Danny and what he's doing here. Sometimes short-term pain for long-term gain. And for fans, that's difficult, especially when you haven't made the playoffs the last 4 years. And if you don't make it this year, you tie your franchise record for your longest drought in terms of a playoff berth. And I was here when the team experienced its 5th straight year out of the playoffs. That was my first year in broadcasting. It was there were some fans that were really upset. And then Bob Clark came in. You talk about a trade that transformed a franchise and transformed a career. They made the trade early in the 94-95 season with Montreal to get Eric Desjardins and John Leclerc, who was not the focal point of that deal, but the trade turned John from a good, solid player into a superstar. That can happen again. They're going to have to try to find deals where you can find a player like that, a young veteran who you can get, similar to what Calgary's going to try to do with Frost and Farabee. The Flyers are going to have to try to do that themselves. And I do think that they are looking more along those lines, Mike, in terms of trades for players. They have 7 picks now in the first 2 rounds of next year's draft. I don't know how many more picks you need in that draft. Maybe they can start trading for picks in the draft after that. But I think maybe it's time now to try to get some young players in here as opposed to just picks. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the draft picks. I mean, they take so long, to come to fruition, and then it's a lot of them. You got to figure out how you can keep, increasing your, raising your capital and all that, and trying to, use that for, with power and using that for some other gains. But, you talk about finding players, it's on your scouting and your analytics, and you got to find a guy, who might be, playing under their potential. Maybe Calgary felt that about, Farabee or something like that, and find the guy, find that diamond in the rough a little bit, and dig deep here and find something. Not somebody who's so easy to find. I got to try and find somebody, using your analytics and using your scouting staff to be like, what do we think of this guy? Is there more to get out of this guy? Can we take a chance there? But it's a good spot. I mean, for players now, hey, you've been griping about not getting your chance, and I want more ice time. Well, now that there's two players gone, there's a chance to move up, and it's a chance, and somebody's got to take advantage of it. If you're a player here, you're thinking, okay, well, these spots just opened up. Well, now's that means I might get a little bit more here. Here's a little crack in the door for me to see if I can't get through it. Maybe I can do something with this. So, there's internally there's room here too, and for chance for improvement. And then like you say, it's a nonstop process on the outside or on at the executive level to figure out how you're going to keep piecing this thing together.
And for you Checkers players out there, Kuzmenko is an outstanding power play net front presence guy, a la 𝐊𝐈𝐂𝐊𝐿. So the Flyers just have not been able to finish on their power play for years
Mhm.
now. They'll get the chances, but they won't score. And then
Right.
after you go through that a little bit, you start pressing and you don't even get the chances. But he is a really good guy around the net that way. So
Mhm.
in his time here, however long that may be, perhaps he does finally help that power play. Maybe 𝐊𝐈𝐂𝐿 and he can, find some symmetry there as the guys who played together before and I guess like each other and are friends. And Jamie Drysdale starting to get more confidence. So maybe there's signs they can finally get something going with that power play because for the first time in NHL history, a team finished at the very bottom of the league in power play 3 straight years. It was the Flyers, and they're like 3 spots from the bottom now. You don't want to make it
Right.
4 straight years. Need to get some goals on that power play.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be successful and be a playoff team, you have to have
Mhm.
good special teams. So
Absolutely.
they've got to get that turned around.
Yeah. No, 100%. Just for you, JJ, just kind of, switching gears a little bit, for you, like, what does a, just like typical day look like, in terms of like, obviously on game day, like, with broadcasting, like for you, I remember like years ago, I used to watch the episodes that they would do on NBC, NBCSN, like for the Wednesday night hockey, and it would be like all the stuff of Doc Emmerich and like all of his prep and everything and his notes and things like that. How much of that stuff were you into? And like obviously notes and things with your voice and anything like that. Is there anything specific that you would do for a game day?
Yeah, my game day is pretty much. In fact, I tell people don't expect me to even make a phone call on game day because I'm pretty much go the whole time. I, as you know, Chris, I do a broadcast coaching, and I do go over my whole process, but it is a 14-step thing, and it starts at 7 in the morning, and it basically I do get a nap in. I don't know, Mike, were you a napper as a player? I have to have my nap on game day.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, yeah, coaching, playing, oh, yeah, you gotta have a little nap, exactly.
Yeah, I have soup for lunch every game day. Broth soup only, can't be cream based because cream based. I had cereal today, that's why I have phlegm right here in this interview. Yeah, if broth based soup, those are some of the little things. As far as the prep, I mean, it's all year. It's going on. The day before the game, I do my roster sheets, my game sheets. I go to practice, talk to the players, and I don't like to talk to players too much on game day. I don't think they want to be talked to on game day. They're in their own routines. If I have a specific question, if I find out 𝐊𝐿𝐿𝐂𝐿𝐿 played with one of the players in the team they're playing that night, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to him about it, I might ask him that. But I don't like to get into any kind of deep conversations on game day with the players. But I go to practice to get out of my house or get out of the hotel room on the road, and but most of it's just doing my prep, roster sheets, game sheets, all that. Do it right from 7 a.m. till 10, go to practice, come back, have my soup at noon, production meeting on the phone at 12:30, and then more prep to about 2:33, take my nap, go to the rink, do the game. It's kind of old habit now, but it's a 14 item checklist I have day of game, and I follow it. And I feel like as a player, you want to be in a zone, right? Mike, as a player, when you're in the zone, I guess what the net looks bigger, whatever. You feel faster, you feel stronger. As a broadcaster, to be in the zone, you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be able to handle whatever happens in that game and be able to talk about it. Now, is that true? Literally, no. For instance, Al Michaels went to Candlestick Park in 1989, preparing to do Game 3 of the World Series, and he ended up calling an earthquake.
Yeah.
So you never know. We had a smoke bomb. Were you there for the smoke bomb, Mike? I think it might have been after
Doesn't
your
ring a
time.
bell, no.
Yeah,
Against
smoke
Jersey?
bomb was thrown on the ice. Wells Fargo Center. I wasn't prepared for that. It led to this long delay. But I within reason, I feel outside of elements like that, I'm ready for anything. And once I get to that point, I'm going to be at my best. I have that confidence. I'm sure I'm of myself. So that's where I want to get to. And that list I have gets me to that point. So I just keep
Right.
following it until I stop doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many parallels between, being a broadcaster and an athlete and, our motor is our bodies and our legs and how we feel physically is yours is your throat,
Yeah.
you're, trying to make sure that your throat's in good shape and probably limit your talking a little bit and much like a performer and
Eyes
singer.
too. That's why I take the nap for
Yeah.
my eyes because your eye strain, you don't even realize it during the course of a day, especially when you're in front of a computer for much of that day. how much you're straining your eyes. So I feel it's real important to like a half hour where you're just, eyes are closed.
Yeah. No, it's all very interesting, very parallel. And I know I did a little bit, I think in my time in Philadelphia, I helped out with the OLN network. Remember it was OLN and then it's
Yes,
diverse.
I was part of that too.
Yeah.
We never worked together,
I
though, did
don't know.
we? I
I
don't think.
did it in studio and I've never been so nervous.
Oh,
But it was like, then you got the idea, the homework, the amount of homework. And I don't think maybe fans realize, and it's great when they'll sometimes show like somebody's cheat sheet up there and the amount of detail. And I know I've been around Doc Emmerich, looking at some of his
oh,
stuff. I've seen your stuff maybe on the airplane, coming over and lean over your shoulder. What are you working on? When you were working with like Jonesy and stuff back in the day, and
yeah.
anybody in broadcasting. I mean, it's just the amount of information in front of them is infinite, and it's crazy the amount of money I'm sorry, the amount of information. And then
I wish.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, that too. Yeah, but yeah, and then adjusting numbers on the fly, and this is this guy. All right, he scored. Now I got to, it's his ninth goal of the year, not his eighth, and staying up on all that, and finding
Yeah.
streaks, and finding correlation in numbers, and stuff like that is just amazing. It's a little bit of a, I imagine you get easier. It's a little easier to figure out as you go, but it's definitely like tying these things together and making for a seamless broadcast is it's much easier. Comes across much easier than it really is.
Yeah, I mean that's the object, to make it seem like you're not
Yeah,
working that hard. So
yeah,
hopefully people don't think I'm working that hard, and it
yeah,
just seems natural.
yeah,
But yeah, I do, and actually, it's gone with the computer age. It's gone from finding the information to disseminating the information. There's so much
yeah.
information now. You just have to figure out what to use and what is superfluous. And there's a lot of extra stuff out there. And now with analytics, it's gotten even heavier. So that's part of it. I'll tell you one quick story about prep, though, and then we can get off this subject. Gene Hart, obviously the legend, Hall of Fame announcer, who was Chris. You know who he is, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes how old are you, Chris?
21.
How old are you, Chris? 21. See, 21-year-olds do not know Gene Hart, a lot of them, and it pains me about that. But I run into 35-year-olds who do not know Gene Hart.
Yeah.
But he was the legend. He's the Hall of Famer. He taught this area all about hockey. He called the Stanley Cup championship teams. And I was lucky enough, my first 2 years there doing radio, he was doing television before he retired, and then I followed him. But for 2 years, I got to watch him work, and it was awesome. And he'd carry around this big black binder, and it was just full of notes and papers. And this was before the computer age. I had this little thin reporter's pad, and I had like 2 sheets every game, and he had all these sheets. So finally, about a month into the season, I said, Gene, I feel so unprepared looking at that big binder of yours and then what I'm using, and I barely have time to use any of all of the information I have. What percentage of that do you use? And he looked at me like the cat who swallowed the canary. Like this, he was waiting for me to ask this
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
and he said 10%. And so of course I fell right into his trap, and I go, 10%? I mean, that's a waste. I mean, 90% of your prep is waste. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. And he goes, but JJ, I don't know which 10% I'm going to use from one game to the next. And that's really true. You're not going to know, especially in covering live events, sports, news, whatever. Live events are so unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to use. So the 90% that hits the cutting room floor that never makes it to air, who cares? It's that you had 100% and you had the 10% that you had to use. And so that's, I since he told me that, I've always been a preparation hound. And when I, through my broadcast coaching class, show them, I have one coming up this afternoon, actually, where I show them all my sheets and I show them exactly what I do to get ready for a game. Some of these kids are like buggy eyed, like, wow, that's a lot. And I tell them the secret, and Mike, you know this, the secret is, and Chris, you're finding this out too, because I know you love what you're doing right now, but the secret is I kind of like it. I love the preparation. I love to dig into a team and find out what makes them tick, and to find out about all the players and to talk to the players and the coaches. And I just love it. So it's not really work. Mike, playing hockey, I'm sure to you was, it paid you well, was great. But did you really think of it as work? It's more like playing a game, right? You enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know it's the best job in the world, and I mean, it's
Yeah.
same with your broadcasting. If you feel it's if you're gonna dig in like that, it's just easy, right? It's really
Yep.
easy, and that's when you know you're doing the right thing. And I'm sure those kids are the kids are loving that. Where do you run that class through? Do you run it through colleges here or in Philly there? Or?
I contact colleges. It's all through Zoom, so
Yeah.
I do it from right here. And sometimes I'm on location, but it's almost always a Zoom. And I do a couple camps in the summer where I do groups, but most of it's one-on-one, 3 sessions, an hour. They go a little more than an hour, as Chris knows. And I
Yeah, I did
talk
it a
about
couple years ago. Yep.
yeah, I talk about everything from uh, broadcast techniques to preparation to finding your niche in this business, which is a challenge.
Sure.
And then I review clips, and then I'm their mentor for as long as they want me. I started. I don't know, what year did you do it, Chris? 21.
Yeah, 21. Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
when I did it,
started
there
it.
was a guy in there that was, I think he was a priest who was working on his homilies too, which was pretty interesting.
Yes. Oh, I've had some.
Yeah.
I had a priest working on his homilies. I said, I do not feel worthy of telling you how to do your sermons, but I've had some. I've had 12-year-olds. I've had 15. I actually had a 62-year-old guy who's doing a podcast. So people who podcast, people who are on the sidelines, people who do anchor work, talk shows, obviously play by play. It doesn't matter. And I've had over 100 now. And I started it during the pandemic. I did not expect to get the numbers I've gotten, and it's been so rewarding to watch all the people, including Chris, who are going on and doing things. And I've had several move from the college ranks. They're now in the AHL doing play-by-play. He's going to be in the NHL. He might replace me. He's moving fast. So
Yeah.
and it's really fun to watch this and watch that development. So it's been very rewarding. And Jim Jackson broadcasting.com if you want to go to see where you can sign up, but it's fun.
Oh, it's good to hear.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't
that's
realize you were
awesome.
doing that. It's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, JJ, and then just one more quick one. Just any funny stories that you can remember. Being with Mike, whether it was like on the plane or anything like that.
Funny stories. My funniest story with
Or,
Mike
or, or
actually
just
happened.
anything, just anything. Yeah.
It actually happened about 3 years ago when he came to an alumni game and he got all cut up
Oh.
on the ice. And I remembered saying, I'm going to get a picture with Mike and let's do it after the game. We did after the game. And I got my first picture with Mike in probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years. And he's all cut up from a puck. It could hit him in the face, right? It was a puck, wasn't a stick, right? It was a puck.
Oh yeah. Eric Lindros was trying to go rink wide to Johnny LeClaire or vice versa, and Shell got in the way. Shell Samuelson got in the way, and puck hit me right in the right cheek where it just already broke before my time in Philly, where I already have a bracket over my cheek and around my eye socket, and thought I was going to be in Philly for a couple days, having surgery again. And I don't know, you could see kind of the way the puck hit me on the side, like the rails, you can see the two, like that. How wide's a puck? 2 inches wide? I don't even know. 1 inch wide?
Yeah.
I don't know. And or not wide, but height wise, you could see the two perfect rails. And Flyers are great. Sent me for a little scan the next morning. I had to move my flight, and they said, "Yeah, you're like dented like a millimeter or two, so not a big deal. We'll just send you on your way. You're all right."
Dented. You're just dented.
Yeah, it's Guy Lancey is like, well, it's in a millimeter or two. We're not really gonna do, if it's we're not really gonna, we just leave it. It's good. So I'm like, okay.
Chris, the picture I have with Mike, he looks like he went 10 rounds with Tyson in his prime. I mean, his whole face is blowing up.
I know.
And it was like, this is the only picture I have of you over the last 15 years, Mike. We'll have to take another one the next time you're in Philly. In fact, I think we did at the alumni game last year. So
yeah, I know.
You were cleaned up. But as far as Mike, when he was a player, I mean, I just remember him being so easy to deal with, to talk to. Was one of the guys who'd come back on the plane and talk to us. We're kind of in the back of the plane, and steerage, we like to call ourselves, but the broadcasters. But some guys would come back and talk, and Mike was one of them. And then, as I said earlier, win or lose with the team, he was there to face the music with the media. Not all guys do that and do it well, and he certainly did. So just a total class act. And as I said, could have wherever he ended up in his goal scoring as a Flyer, I know he really should have been higher on the list.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I know. We all should be higher, but anyway, you're thankful for what you got, I guess.
And fearless going in front of the net too. I mean, I still remember, John. You'll get a kick out of this, Mike, because it's kind of like generational how it works. I was in my early years. Gary Dornhofer was my partner, and that was his career, standing in front of the net. And he took back then. the game was different. He got cross-checked and speared and what have you. So by the time, I was here in the 90s, it had changed. It was still pretty tougher than it is now, because they were still letting you grab, and until the lockout in '04, whether they really clamped down on that. But John LeClaire was then the net front guy, and I remember Dorney saying, you don't have anything like it was for me. And Johnny's like, what? And Johnny had back, his back was always sore. He was saying, I think it's pretty tough now. And then the other day, I heard Johnny giving it to, it was not the other day, about 2 years ago, JVR, who is now our net front guy, and say, it's not like it was when I was playing.
Yeah.
JVR, well, it's still pretty tough. I have to go there. I mean, right now, I think the biggest danger is the puck sometimes, because guys are getting hit with those pucks when they do the net front, but they can't get cross-checked too much anymore.
Yeah.
Mike, in your day, you could get manhandled pretty good in there. So you were fearless going into that area.
Well, yeah, I know you touched on before 2004, you had guys like Hatch and, Pronger, and they were, it was defensive philosophy, right? Clear the front of the net. That's just what everybody wanted, and what coaches demanded. And then, it's kind of evolved over time, and through '04, and you couldn't have the stick work. And now defensive philosophies, they want defensemen loose, and they're more covering space than getting tied up with somebody. So it has gotten easier to be around there. And I'm thankful that it occurred during my time in the league. I'm not going to feel bad about that. I got to take advantage of it. And I think it definitely helped me through the course of my career to have that rule change or whatever. But again, now with the and the way the guys shoot the puck, it's like guys are just, they fire it, right? Everybody's trying to get this seam pass to a one-timer. So it's really, and these pucks are coming, and they're coming all over. You learn to trust players. I think you learn on your own team who can shoot a puck straight and who has no idea where it's going. And it's kind of like,
who tends to get it upstairs.
Who tends to lift the puck. And it's much like a batter in the batter's box, seeing the ball come out of the pitcher's hand, and they know when it's leaving the hand where it's going, right? And so same thing as in hockey. I can tell by who's shooting and how the pass. If that pass is wobbly coming to them a little bit, I'm like, oh, here it comes, and you're just trying to get out of the way and avoid getting hit, right between the eyes or something. So, it's that time did change for sure. It got a lot easier. And I think back, I played some alumni hockey with Dino Cicerelli, had 600 career goals, and man, he was not the biggest guy, but you think back in the day, if he had these rules, how many he would have gotten with his hand-eye and all that, and his savvy around the net. So, times have changed, and everybody's going to complain that that our group had it harder than your group, for sure. That's just that's just a lot of the jungle.
I covered baseball for years and years and years, and it was hilarious to watch one generation talk about the generation before. The baseball was way better then, and then the same people who were being told that the baseball was better then were saying that about 10 years later, and it just goes on in all sports. It goes on and on. I would say in watching hockey, it is better now than it ever has been in terms of the skill level. There's not as much hitting. So I'm not saying it's better from a fan standpoint, but just from a skill standpoint and the speed that's involved, I think it's probably better now. Personally, I like the physical play.
Sure.
So it might be your era, Mike, or Lindros, that the 90s to the aughts might have been the best. But unfortunately, right in the middle of that was the trap era, which really wasn't great, because teams weren't even trying to score in that era. So it's different. But I'd say hockey, if like for me, football was way better in the past. I thought in the 90s, 80s, the NFL to me in the 80s, 90s, maybe just into the turn of the century was better than it is now. It's a track meet now. The defensive guys have no chance pretty much, especially defensive backs. They can't do anything. And so to me, I still love football, but I loved it more back then. The NBA I loved back then compared to what I see now. And Major League Baseball is getting good. I think the pitch clock and all that has helped, but it really bogged down there in the last decade and into the early part of this decade. And really, when I left the Phillies, or the Phillies basically told me to leave, I wasn't that upset. The game at that point had slowed down to a crawl. They were taking 3.5 hours. And then, of course, 2 years later, they put the pitch clock in and go, where was this when I was covering the games? Because I did the pre and post. So for me, a 3.5 hour game was like a 6 hour game. I did the pre and the post, and the games just dragged and dragged and dragged. But I still think baseball was better back in the day than it is now. But hockey, I'd say, if I had to pick an era, I think it's great now. It really is. I think it is. So some people, John Tortorella, would disagree with me. He thinks there's not enough physicality. I'd like to see a little more physicality. We do see it, and it's kind of vicious. Some of the physicality we've seen, certainly in the recent Flyer games, we've seen some vicious hits, but it's not as consistent, the physical play, right, Mike? I mean, it used to be more consistent physical. But again, when you played, Mike, I'm sure you had players who played 10, 15 years before you who said it's not physical anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, that was your role when you were there too, right? It was your way to make it. Now it's all, anybody's coming up. It's pretty much offense and skill, and you're trying to add to the team. I mean, they bring up the odd tougher guy, like Matt Rempe and with the Rangers, you see the odd call up like that, but it's not like you're bringing up a guy for toughness anymore. And used to be a way to get out of the minors too. It was an alternate route to get out of the minors was being scrappy and PK and fight a bit. And, there was a role for you. Now it's like you got to score. We talked earlier, you got to score your way there a little bit, and then figure out how to play defense when you're there to stay, and kind of have some growing pains. If you're a real true offensive player, you're going to learn how to play a little bit of defense when you're there. But and again, I guess it's changed for the better. Maybe you can't bring the 2-line pass down, back. But if you slowed it down a little bit, I wonder if that would help. But again, that's probably not going back to that at all. And you had to move the puck. It wasn't like D to D up the boards and just chip it in and get it down in their zone. It was a little more tic tac toe to get it up the ice. But they're not going to go back to that. It's like you said, it's in a pretty good spot right now. I got to believe the league's pretty happy where things are right now.
Yeah, it's like a catch-22, right?
It is.
If you bring
it
the
is.
2-line pass back and make it illegal, then you're going to have probably more whistles. So,
Yeah.
but you're going to force more creativity in getting the puck up the ice. It's a catch-22. There are some games where it's just, like I'm getting hypnotized back, forth, just tipping it down the ice, tipping it down the other.
Yeah.
But for the most part, somewhere in there, a scoring chance develops. We've had some snoozers this year, but we had some snoozers back in my first year in 1993. So
Absolutely.
I don't.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think you can completely in an 82 game schedule. You're not going to have all thrillers. We do have some really good games too, and I'm sure the teams that are at the top of the standings most nights the games are really good. So that just comes with the territory in any sport. You're going to have some games that aren't as good as others, but in general, I think the game's in a pretty good place. There's always things we can improve. The goaltender interference is so weird. It's hard to determine what it is and what it isn't, and other things. But in general, I think when you watch a NHL game, especially when you're at the game, you're entertained, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. Yep.
For sure. JJ, this has been great. Thanks so much for doing this, taking the time to join us. And
My pleasure.
Love to have you back.
Anytime. I mean, you timed it well. You knew the trade was happening, evidently, when you scheduled it. And we didn't even talk about Michkov and Tortorella, and we're out of time. So I guess I can't talk about that. But Mike, it's been great seeing and talking with you again too, Chris as well. I mean, always great talking hockey.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. I really appreciate the time. It was great of you to come out and spend some time with us, man. I really appreciate it.
As I said, my pleasure, and I owe you a lot because you spent a lot of time talking to me as a player when I was asking you questions. So I probably owe you about 7 or 8 more of these.